All right, let's dive into this Alpine A110. Seems like you've really taken an interest in it, and I can see why. This stack of articles and notes you've given us is well, that's pretty impressive. Goes way beyond just, your typical sports car stuff.
Yeah, it seems like you're really digging into what makes this car special, not just how it drives, but, like the whole design philosophy and engineering behind it.
Exactly. We've got info on the design, obviously, its racing history too, even how it's doing in the used car market, which is kind of surprising. It's almost like the A110 is like bucking all the trends.
Yeah, kind of a fascinating case study.
Yeah.
Especially when you consider that this car is in a lot of ways like a throwback to an earlier era of sports cars.
So, are we thinking this is just a fad, or is it pointing towards a bigger shift in what drivers are looking for these days?
That's a great question, and it's definitely something worth exploring, especially because, like I said, the A110 is kind of going against the grain.
Yeah.
It's all about being lightweight and driver-focused when most sports cars today are getting heavier and more reliant on all the tech and gadgets.
Okay, so let's start with that whole throwback vibe then. The A110's design, I mean, it's got that retro look for sure, with those round headlights and that teardrop shape.
Yeah.
Almost like a modern version of a classic sports car, right?
You got it. And that connection to the past is totally intentional. The original A110 back in the 60s, well, it was a total giant killer in the rally world. Tiny little thing, super lightweight, crazy agile. It took on much bigger, more powerful cars and just blew them away. The new A110 definitely brings back that spirit, but it's not just about nostalgia.
Right, because these articles mention that even though it looks like something out of a classic car magazine under the skin, it's got some serious engineering going on, like that all-aluminum construction.
Oh yeah, that's a big deal. Most sports cars today use steel for the body, but Alpine went with aluminum for both the chassis and the body. It's more expensive, harder to work with, but man, the weight savings are huge.
Okay, but how much lighter are we talking, and how'd they actually pull that off? Didn't they just swap out steel for aluminum? I mean, it can't be that easy, right?
Oh no, it's much more involved than that. They use some really advanced bonding techniques, and they actually vary the thickness of the aluminum in different areas. So in some spots it's thicker, in others it's thinner, all to save weight and maximize strength.
Wow, so it's high-tech tailoring for a car.
Exactly. They managed to shave off hundreds of pounds compared to a traditional steel body.
Okay, so we've got this super light platform, but it needs some muscle too, right? I see the A110 has a 1.8-liter turbocharged engine, and those specs look kind of familiar. Isn't that the same engine that's in the Renault Megane RS? That hot hatch?
Good catch. You're right, there's definitely some shared DNA there.
Yeah.
Both cars are part of the Renault family, but the A110's engine is tuned differently.
So it's not just about raw power then, more about finesse.
Exactly. Instead of just brute force acceleration, they focused on making the A110's engine really responsive and smooth.
Yeah.
It's meant to work with that lightweight chassis to give you a more balanced, driver-focused experience.
And to make it even more fun, they paired that engine with a 7-speed dual clutch transmission, right? So that's lightning fast gear changes.
Yeah, exactly. It all adds to the A110's agile character quick shifts, keeping the engine in that sweet spot where it makes the most power.
Now, I want to touch on something else too. These sources you've provided mention the A110's racing history, which is pretty impressive. There's a lot in here about its success in GT4 racing and even rally racing. Some of it's a bit over my head, I gotta admit. So can you break it down for us? What are the key takeaways?
Sure thing. So the A110 is actually quite competitive in a few different types of motorsport, including GT4 racing, which uses modified production cars. And they're doing really well, winning races, podium finishes, even against some really tough competition.
So it's not just a pretty face, then. It can actually back it up on the track.
Oh, absolutely. Take the GT4 European Series, for example. The A110 has consistently challenged and often beaten cars from Porsche, Aston Martin, all the big names. And it's not just about track racing either. It's also doing well in rally, which takes a different kind of toughness and agility.
Okay, so this is where things get really interesting for me. We've got this car that's a throwback to the classics, but it's also packed with modern tech and it's proving itself on the racetrack. But then you look at the used car market and, well, the A110's doing something pretty unusual there too, isn't it?
You're right. Normally sports cars, especially ones like this, they lose value pretty quickly. But the A110 is actually holding its value really well. Some well-maintained examples are even going up in price.
Wow, that's practically unheard of for a modern sports car. What's driving that trend? Is it just because they didn't make that many of them?
Limited production definitely plays a role, but it's more than that. The A110's combination of heritage, performance, and that unique driving experience it offers. It's attracting a very specific kind of owner, people who recognize that this is a special car. And that translates to high demand, even in the used market.
It really sounds like we're starting to understand what makes this car so special. But I have a feeling we've only scratched the surface here. There's a lot more to uncover, and luckily you've given us plenty to dig into.
Yeah, there's a deeper story here for sure. And I think it goes beyond just, specs and how fast it goes around a track. The A110 is kind of like a symbol of a different way of thinking about driving,
Yeah.
one that's becoming harder and harder to find these days.
Oh, I like that. What exactly is that philosophy, though? And why does it seem to resonate with so many people, both critics and just regular car enthusiasts?
We'll take a look at what's happening in the car industry right now. Everything's getting bigger, heavier, more and more reliant on technology to make it go fast.
Yeah.
Electric powertrains, complex all-wheel drive systems, touchscreens for everything. It can be a bit much sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. Even with sports cars, it feels like it's all about horsepower and lap times these days. Sometimes it feels like the simple joy of driving gets lost in all the tech.
Exactly. And that's where the A110 comes in. It's almost like a rejection of all that.
Yeah.
It's like they're saying, what if we just strip everything back, focus on the essentials, lightness, agility, that direct connection between the car and the driver.
So it's like a back to basics approach, but with a modern twist.
Exactly. They're using cutting-edge materials and engineering, but the goal is to create a pure driving experience. Think about it. That lightweight construction, the responsive engine, the finely tuned suspension, it's all about making the car feel alive, engaging, fun to drive.
Okay, but isn't there a risk that by focusing so much on feel, you sacrifice outright performance? I mean, some people just want a car that's insanely fast, even if it's not that exciting to drive.
That's a fair point, and it's something the car industry is trying to figure out right now.
Wow.
But the A110 shows that you can actually have both. It might not be the fastest car in a straight line or have the quickest 0-60 time, but because it's so light and nimble, it's incredibly quick on a winding road, in the real world.
So it's more about how a car feels when you're actually driving it, not just what the numbers say.
Exactly. And all the reviews seem to agree. Critics love the A110's handling, the way it communicates with the driver, the sheer joy it brings. It's the kind of car that makes you want to take the long way home, just to enjoy every corner.
I can definitely see the appeal of that, especially if you see driving as more than just getting from point A to point B.
Exactly.
Right.
The A110 is a true driver's car. It's not trying to shield you from the experience. It's inviting you to be a part of it.
You mentioned earlier that this approach is resonating with car enthusiasts. Are there any signs that other car makers are starting to follow Alpine's lead?
Oh, I think they're definitely paying attention. We're starting to see more of an emphasis on lightweighting, even in really high-performance cars. Some manufacturers are even offering stripped-down, driver-focused versions of their existing models.
So the A110 could be seen as sort of trailblazer then, showing that there's a market for this type of car.
It's possible. Its success might encourage other car makers to be a little more daring, to explore different approaches instead of just following that bigger is better mentality that's been around for so long.
That would be awesome. Imagine a world with more cars like the A110. Cars that are all about the joy of driving, the connection between the car and the person behind the wheel.
It's a nice thought, right? And the A110 shows that it can be done. It reminds us that sometimes less is more.
Now, you did say earlier that some critics point out that the A110 isn't the most practical car. Small trunk, no manual transmission option, things like that.
True. And it's good to be aware of those things. The A110 isn't treated to be everything to everyone. It's a focused sports car, which means some compromises had to be made.
So maybe not the best daily driver for someone who needs to haul a lot of stuff or who really likes shifting gears themselves?
Probably not. But if you're looking for a pure, unfiltered driving experience, those compromises probably won't matter that much compared to what the A110 offers.
It's funny. As we've been talking, I keep thinking about the A110's design. You said it's like a modern take on a classic. And I'm curious how they managed to pull that off so well. A lot of retro-inspired cars end up looking kind of forced or cheesy, but the A110 doesn't have that problem at all. How did they do it?
It's a tough balance to get right, for sure. Alpine did a great job with it. They didn't just try to copy the original A110 exactly. They reinterpreted it for today. They captured what made the original so special, the small size, the flowing lines, the feeling of lightness and agility. But they did it in a way that feels modern.
So they took the spirit of the original A110 and gave it a fresh, contemporary look.
Exactly. They took inspiration from the past, but they weren't afraid to put their own spin on it. And the result is a car that feels both familiar and new. It's like a perfect mix of heritage and modern design.
I'm really impressed with how much thought went into the A110's design. It's clear that they really wanted to create something special, something that would stand the test of time.
And I think they succeeded. The A110 is a beautifully designed car. It looks great, and it has a real purpose. It reminds us that good car design isn't just about how it looks. It's about capturing the car's personality, its soul.
It feels like we're uncovering some deeper layers here now. We've gone beyond the basic facts and started to explore the A110's philosophy, its influence on the car world, and how it manages to blend classic and modern design so well. But I have a feeling there's even more to discover.
I agree. We've just scratched the surface of the A110's story, and I'm really interested to see what else we can learn about its appeal and what it might tell us about the future of driving.
You know, it's funny, as we've been talking about the A110's design and its whole philosophy, I kept thinking about the fact that it's a revival of a classic name, you know? Bringing back a name from the past. That's going to be a risky move for any car company. Like, how do you recapture that magic? What do you think made Alpine decide to bring back the A110 after all these years?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there are a few things going on. I mean, for one thing, there's this whole trend of nostalgia in the car world these days.
Yeah.
People looking back at the cars they grew up with and wanting modern versions of those classic designs.
Oh, yeah, for sure. We're seeing that everywhere now. Muscle cars, hot hatches. It seems like every car maker is bringing back something from their past.
Exactly. And for Alpine, the A110 is like their most iconic car. It's the one that really put them on the map. It represents everything they stood for. Lightness, agility, winning races. It makes sense that they would choose to bring back the A110 as they were trying to get back into the car market.
But it's more than just nostalgia, right? It feels like the A110 is trying to say something more, like a statement about what a sports car should be.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think Alpine saw a chance to offer something different, something that was missing from all the sports cars out there today.
Yeah.
A car that focused on the pure joy of driving instead of just chasing horsepower numbers and lap times.
It's like they're saying, hey, remember what it felt like to drive a car that was actually connected to the road, a car that responded to you.
Yeah, exactly. And it seems like people are really responding to that message. The A110 is winning awards, getting great reviews, and it's attracting a really passionate group of fans.
You know, as we've been talking, I've realized something. The A110 isn't just a car. It's like a symbol. It represents a whole different way of thinking about driving and performance, about how we connect with machines.
I think you're right on the money there. The A110 is kind of a rebel in a way. It's going against the trend of making cars bigger, heavier, more complicated. It's saying that you don't have to sacrifice driving pleasure just to have the latest technology or the fastest speed.
It gives you hope, too, right? Hope that there's still room out there for cars that are made for the love of driving, for the pure joy of being behind the wheel.
Yeah, absolutely. The A110 shows that people still want that kind of car, that they haven't forgotten what it means to really connect with a machine.
So what do you think the future holds for the A110? Can it keep going strong in a car market that's always changing?
Well, it's tough to say for sure, but I think the A110 has a good chance. It's already earned a spot as a modern classic, a car that people will remember for being unique and for putting the driving experience first.
And hey, who knows? Maybe it'll inspire other car companies to do the same, to make more cars that put the joy of driving front and center. That would be a good thing for everyone, wouldn't it?
Oh, definitely. The A110 has shown that there's a demand for that kind of car and that people are looking for a more engaging, more fun way to drive.
Well, I think that about wraps up our deep dive into the world of the Alpine A110. It's been awesome exploring its design, performance, its whole philosophy, and how it fits into the bigger picture of the car world.
It's been fun chatting about it with you. The A110 is a really special car, and it deserves all the attention it's getting.
And to you, our listener, if you ever get a chance to see an A110 out in the wild, really take a look. It's a reminder that even in a world that's obsessed with speed and tech, there are still cars out there that are built for the pure joy of driving.
And maybe, just maybe, it'll make you want to go find that joy yourself, whether it's in an A110 or another car that speaks to you. That's what it's all about, right?
That's all for this deep dive. See you next time, and happy driving.